Scrapnik Island, Issue 1. It starts out with Tails flying the plane with Sonic on it on a stormy night with no explanation right away. So I'm just wondering why they're doing something so likely to get them killed. It feels like it's only happening because it happened in Sonic Rush Adventure. It's meta logic instead of making sense. Sonic's surprised to see the remains of the Death Egg. So the tornado gets struck by lightning, and Sonic wakes up after being knocked out. I've seen that before. But it's new that Tails isn't with him this time. He's surrounded by the remains of old Badniks. It doesn't make any sense that they'd be put in a junkyard instead of reused to make more robots, which would save time and resources. Eggman could send robots to look for Badnik remains, so there's no excuse. Then Sonic puts his foot on the floor and it clanks, and for no reason he's wearing a different shoe with metal on it now, and he thinks it hurts. Then he sees Tails' tablet and holds it up to use it for light in the darkness. Then he sees a floating capsule with a flower on it. Again, for no apparent reason. I'll be grateful anytime it actually explains something that seems to happen for no reason. He hears a noise and goes some other way. I can't wait for the story to start explaining things properly, but I can definitely compliment the fact that because there's barely any characters in it, the plot's moving at a fast pace. I'm already at the 9th page as he sees the egg carrier. Someone would have to use some heavy machinery to drag it out of the ocean that it clearly landed on SA1. At no point was it ever in the Death Egg, nor was Egg Carrier 2. Someone would have to intentionally put it here. It'd be more plausible if it was a different airship. Sonic says this place is like a museum of Eggman's old stuff. It reminds me of how Starline showed Eggman that he collected his old stuff a lot earlier on, so it looks like a base of Starlines right now. He hears a noise again and sees a damaged Badnik and gets surrounded by other Badniks, though they don't look mad at him. It makes absolutely no sense that he'd just stand there scared of them and wonder if this is a nightmare, because this is the guy who kills Badniks all the time, every time he goes through a level. Hurtfoot or not, why would he be too scared to fight them when we know he could just spin jump into it to beat it? And still has the homie attack. And if the idea is he feels sorry for them and is too merciful to kill them, well obviously there's no way it's canon that Sonic's too nice to even beat Badniks if he doesn't have to. Especially considering that a Badnik is known for having an animal trapped inside it. So why would he just assume there aren't any of these when there were animals and Badniks as recently as Sonic Lost World? I wish he had a thought bubble explaining it would hurt to jump, so I can't do that. Is that why he isn't spin dashing either? Then he notices Mecha Sonic behind him, and it stands in a fighting stance, looking nothing like it did the last time it showed up in the games. But I'm wondering why it has a tattered cape on, and it looks damaged. So whoever brought him here was too lazy to fully repair it, for some reason. He does a super peel out and feels hurt and assumes that he busted his ankle in the plane crash, even though that's the same ankle as the foot he's got a strange shoe on now. So I assumed the shoe was causing him pain to keep him from causing too much damage here. I wish he explained this a lot earlier. He leaves the room and thinks he can barely run, and the robots follow him. Mecha Sonic has to be really damaged or doesn't have orders to kill, just scare him away, if he isn't instantly catching up to a Sonic that can barely run. Sonic hides in a Badnik capsule. I don't know why these are here either. You'd think if someone went through the trouble of getting one of these, then just one would be good enough for having a collection, and most of them would just be turned into scrap metal to be used for other stuff. So why does Mecha Sonic still look damaged, if someone could have just took metal out of the Badnik capsule and used that for metal to replace the metal he lost? Sonic screams at the robot finding him. What did he expect after he talked while hiding from a robot right next to him? The robot jumps on top of the Badnik capsule, and Sonic throws a part of the capsule onto the floor and slides along it across it because it's slanted. I guess the floor is slanted downwards, or this wouldn't make any sense. Then he runs into a robot looking like Gamma, but again it has some clothing tied around its head for some reason. So he'll waste time doing that, but he didn't have the time to use the useless stuff like a defunct egg carrier for scrap metal. Maybe figured the egg carrier could come in handy against a bigger threat than Eggman someday, so he thought it shouldn't be destroyed. I like that the Gamma robot has a red cape, because it reminds you of Gamma every time. Tails greets him happily, which already gives away the twist I saw coming from a mile away, that the Badniks are friendly. Go figure, because they didn't look mad at him, and weren't really trying to fight him. This kind of misunderstanding would have been cleared up a lot sooner if this was the earliest of Archie Sonic where the Badniks could talk for no reason. I love this twist. The idea of Badniks being nice never gets old. Probably because they kind of look cute and innocent. But again, it's been done plenty of times. I've even seen Sonic exploring an abandoned Death Egg before in SCC that was in the ocean. Tails says the Scrapnicks helped them drag Sonic inside after they crashed, and even built a foot brace for Sonic. And thankfully it's explained why he suddenly called them Scrapnicks. That's what they call themselves, as opposed to the obvious Nice-nicks or Good-nicks. Oh no, instead they have a name that insults them. If they can talk, why the hell did none of them try talking to Sonic earlier? That's ridiculous. Now one of them talks. He could have talked to him as soon as he saw Sonic. If they were friendly, why did he even bother jumping onto the animal capsule instead of just waiting there and having them catch up with him and telling his friends to catch up with him? A robot greets him calling himself Sigma, which isn't creative because we already saw a character named Sigma in Worlds Unite, and there's so many other Greek letters you could have chosen. Sonic was placed under observation because of his injury, and he gets asked for forgiveness. The Badniks would have to be reprogrammed to not want to kill Sonic and Tails anymore to become like this. So that needs to be explained, as well as why the person who reprogrammed them would even do that. He's apologized to for the crashing of his plane because the storm was caused by the station's malfunctioning disruptor. I thought it just happened for the same reason every other storm does, because that's more likely. Why would the Death Egg have a climate disruptor? I doubt mere lightning would damage something so big. Sonic's told that Sigma can't repair it and no one can permanently decommission it. Apparently nobody here has access to lasers to blast right through it, or a way to strike it with a huge amount of force, like the force of a spin dash or hammer. Sonic's told their plane will get mended eventually, as I really wish I was told why they even went on that plane ride to force the story to happen, when I'm pretty sure they had a better thing to do. Sonic would run around to explore for fun, not go on a pointless, risky plane ride across the ocean for fun when he's scared of drowning, so he wouldn't like staring at the water. They're shown the outside of Scrapnik Island, which has a bunch of orange stuff on it, and Tails gets excited because it's a civilization made from recycled machines and spare parts. I already saw that in AOSDH, a town full of abandoned robots. At least it's more believable here because it's well hidden from Eggman, being out in the ocean. Eggman was given no incentive to look for any place of interest out on the ocean, so that's why he didn't bother. But I'm wondering why Tails took so long to react like this, because he's known about the Badniks being good for some time. Tails is told he'll get shown around, and Sonic gets spied on from a distance. Sonic goes away from Mecha Sonic, and then the robot gets hit by a blue spike ball, and that turns out to be an evil blue robot with a cowboy hat. For no apparent reason. I love that it has a cowboy hat. It's interesting and impressive that it referenced Archie Sonic. Scrapnik Island, Issue 2. We see an E-Series robot washed up on the island, with no explanation to justify it and the entire arc as a result. He wakes up and starts repairing robots, and looks endearingly happy about it. Most of the panels from this flashback are a waste of time, because that's all the plot is in it. I only needed 2 of them. I guess he became good for the same reason Gamma did, but he didn't need Annie's help? That was very convenient. We're supposed to just accept that it makes sense that he's good because he reminds us of Gamma, but it doesn't mean it does make sense. Because all of the other E-Series robots were blindly loyal to Eggman, and Amy needed to talk to one of them while holding a bird that happened to be related to him to make him different. Eventually, Tails tells Sonic that he made a translator to decrypt the Scrapnick's communication signals for them. I have a question. If Eggman thought that it gave him an advantage to make the Badniks able to communicate in any way, why did he make them only able to communicate with each other, while completely unable to ask him for clarification or something, which is half the point of letting a robot talk? That's dumb of him. If he has a translator too, why would he want to have to lug that thing around all the time, or always have to be near the robots in the Eggmobile with a translator in it? After more panels are wasted, they're told a part of their plane needs replacement, and a robot says they'll have to get a replacement for them in the Depik, but it'll take some time. Tails tells him he should sit back and rest, and Sonic says that if he does any more sitting back, he'll lose it and is going stir-crazy. Yeah, that's relatable, but every time Sonic's ignored his advice and done his own thing anyways, it's horribly backfired on him. I feel bad for Tails for having to put up with this all the time, as if Sonic thinks he's smarter than him. When even Surge always humors Kit when he has his own idea and she wants to do something else. In no other continuity has this been a huge problem for them. It makes me miss Sadie M and Archie, where Sally, the smart one, was listened to by Sonic. Did Sonic mostly ignore Sally's smart advice and screw up anyways with stupid decisions? I don't really remember that. If so, then this is just recycling the Sonic and Sally dynamic. Except they don't argue angrily, he just sits there and lets them make mistakes. There's a lot of irrelevant panels in this. Tails is told to start fixing his plane. Megasonic's been caring for the sunflower after it washed ashore. Probably out of boredom. Sonic feels sorry for the robots as he's told that it's their dream to leave this island because it's a constant reminder of their shameful origins and they can't live happily without leaving it. But it's obvious that they'd be treated badly if they went out in public. As in, the military would be sent to kill them badly. How is nobody pointing this out just to not being polite? There's being polite, but it's clearly not a higher priority than preventing them from getting themselves killed. Sonic's nice and reassuring instead, but Mechasonic's just annoyed, but thankfully doesn't attack him after he was framed earlier for no reason, so that avoids needless drama. Still, I'm being given way too much needless exposition here. The robots want to reconstruct the egg carrier to leave the island, since they're idiots who don't think ahead. Sonic's handed a flashlight because he has normal eyes. It's cool that the robots can see in the dark. Then Sonic's left alone with Megasonic and wastes time saying a ton of stuff being nice to him. How boring. Finally, it carries him away from danger, and Sonic calls the robot threatening him Mech Knuckles. It's about time the Mech Knuckles from Sonic Advance gets used in the actual story, but it's not that impressive, because it's just reusing an idea instead of creating your own. But I can't help but appreciate it, because it's a more obscure reference than normal, and to a robot that wasn't taken advantage of enough. And Sigma happily calls Mechaknuckles a spirited fellow whose programming compels him to defend the Master Emerald Shrine. And somehow, his directives to do that are so deeply embedded in his programming that Sigma was unable to fully remove them. I don't get it. Wouldn't it just be one sentence in his programming? Defend Master Emerald Shrine. That's all it'd have to be. That's all it would be. He could just delete every instance of the sentence. So Sigma diverted its protective instincts to guarding the scrambled egg carrier instead. How can an E-Series robot reprogram in the first place? Eggman didn't need to make him that smart. So how did any of the story arc happen? How did the robots get made to be harmless? There's a reason I assumed a mad scientist reprogrammed them instead. There's a reason I didn't assume a robot reprogrammed them. Mechaknuckles eventually attacks Sigma for no reason, and that's treated like a big deal, and Mechasonic attacks him. He gets attacked right back, and I have to assume Mechasonic's starting to remember some past memories. But it's confusing because it goes from Knuckles being there with some black bar over his eyes to Sonic taunting him with a black bar over his eyes. It's just too confusing because the black bar is there for no reason. Won't it suck if that was never explained? I don't really care about what's going on. Why would I? It's just trying to reference what happened in the games already. Only in the games, it was much faster paced because there was never any indication that Knuckles or Sonic wasted time taunting the robot that was going to kill them any second. but here it makes less sense. The robot defeats Mechaknuckles and then ends up grabbing Sonic, even though he was supposed to have been reprogrammed to be good, ending the story with confusing writing. Scrapnik Island, Issue 3. Sonic wakes up lying on a metal bench with a helmet on his head and complains that his getting betrayed by his enemies is getting old. It got old the second he started trying to reason with Surge, even though she's brainwashed. Sonic lampshades that Megasonic has no reason to act like this. Eventually, a little robot spots Sonic and runs away to tell the others. After a complete waste of pages, eventually the robot shows Sonic on Tails' tablet, and Tails puts together a weapon and a night vision visor to go save Sonic with the other robots. So he's actually being cool, for literally the first time in the comic. They eventually find Sigma, so we'll get our time wasted even more by his chatting with them, but I'm just impatient to get a move on. Sigma says that when he rebuilt Megasonic, he tried to rewrite Eggman's original programming of him, but his old protocols and subroutines got reawakened. I have a question. Why weren't they deleted? All you'd have to do is highlight them and press the backspace button. If he rewrote the original programming, there's no reason the old programming would still be there because it was replaced and messed with. That's like saying that after highlighting a word and typing down a new word, it's possible for the old word to come back. I guess someone did this to him. Megasonic threatens them, and the tablet translates him as saying that he's discarded and forgotten. I already saw that with Fiona. Tails has to run away and ends up on his own, and Megasonic whines that he was Eggman's best creation and was supposed to conquer the world with him, but wants to correct Eggman's mistake, abandoning him the Death Egg, even though he really has no reason to want to be with him again if he proved he didn't care about him. And you'd think its attachment to him would be erased. He wants Tails' tablet for some reason, and the predictable stuff happens, and Tails eventually spin dashes at him just for the spin dash to get caught. At least the robot is sliding across the floor, being realistically moved by the force of that spin dash, so it's trying to make sense. He's made of tougher stuff than an organic being, so that's why it's supposed to make sense that the spin dash didn't hurt him. He gets thrown to the floor and thrown into a hole, saying that now he'll know what it feels like to be thrown away, because he doesn't know that Tails was abandoned by his parents. The comic's too gutless to actually bring that up though, and Tails falls without trying to fly at all. Obviously there's no chance of him actually being ridden to be killed off, and characters in Sonic survive the impossible all the time, so I can assume his rings are gonna protect him anyways, even if the logic is he's unable to fly because of too much downward momentum. He's gonna fly to save himself, so it's just wasting my time with the cliffhanger instead of showing him saving himself in the same story, which it could easily do. I assume that it'll be shown him saving himself eventually. The story ends with Sonic being told that he'll be joining Tails shortly, as we see something on the screen, and Sonic accused him of wanting to suck his brains out earlier. So is he going to get information out of Sonic, or literally do that? There's no information he'd want, or anyone would be able to use. I can understand him wanting to be organic. He hasn't mentioned anyone he's carrying out the orders of, and hasn't mentioned that he was reprogrammed to cause trouble for no reason. He just gave his own predictable excuse for doing this. And why would a person retype his old protocols into him just to hide, instead of gloating about this all being because of him? That wouldn't be like such a person. But if he wasn't reprogrammed to start causing trouble, then it's a lot more confusing than it happened. Because him being attacked wouldn't magically cause his old protocols to be retyped. It would just cause him to be unable to move well and just do and say stupid stuff from brain damage. And Mechaknuckles attacked Megasonic and Sigma with no explanation, so he wasn't a good guy because he hurt Sigma for no reason. But he couldn't be working for Metal Sonic either, or he wouldn't have attacked him and risked making his plan impossible to carry out. Scrapnik Island, Issue 4. Megasonic gets watched by some badniks as he says the subject's secure and explains to Sonic that the helmet on him was Eggman's invention. At one point, Eggman loved the idea of controlling his badniks directly with his mind, but then he got bored with it and scrapped the whole project, which is far less competent and cool than STC Online Robotnik, who got to a point where he was sending entire armies of badniks after people with his mind. This Eggman decided he didn't need that. After all, it is pointless to control just a few robots. But surely he'd find victory more satisfying if he was the one controlling the robot that beat Sonic. I'm pretty sure if Amir Badnick actually beat Sonic, he'd be underwhelmed by the news because it'd be too easy and someone else did it for him. Mecha Sonic plans on using the tablet to download his mind into Sonic's body and vice versa. That's new. As in, a robot doing that to him this specific way is new. I've already seen him get body switched with someone with technology. Most of this arc is just old ideas. But this seems like a convoluted plan for someone only meant to be a killer robot. Mecha Sonic says that he'll run across the water to make sure Eggman never forgets him again. Blissfully unaware that he wouldn't think he was better than Metal Sonic anyways. Wouldn't a robot Sonic be able to run across the water as he is because he has Sonic's abilities? The only way this would make sense is if he isn't waterproof. Sure, he's heavier than Sonic, but so what? It's already unrealistic that he's able to run at the speed of sound anyways. And being heavier than water doesn't cause him to fall into the water. It's good that he's red to make him seem new, but he's not a new character. I've already seen a red Metal Sonic in SDC. Sonic calls him out on trying to ditch his friends when Eggman ditched him. Mecha Sonic has written a pause before saying friendship is a weakness. And the pause would be a waste of time to write if he actually did mean it when he said those badniks were never his friends. And Sonic accuses them of not meaning it. But he has no reason to think that. So the only reason he'd say it aside from being a moron is that he's trying to manipulate him into changing his mind. He says he'll start the mind transfer and energy starts moving around. And then the badniks jump on Mecha Sonic to cause an explosion and ruin his plan. Why did they wait so long? It sure is convenient that the mind transfer couldn't happen instantly, like anyone would imagine. Like how it happened every other time it happened in the series. What a nice Deus Ex Machina, but it could have easily been written that he didn't get the chance to press the button. So Mecha Sonic throws a tantrum, and Sonic wonders whose voice that is, which is weird. How would he forget Mecha Sonic's voice? He thinks that someone else's memories are being shoved into his mind. It doesn't make sense that he says being instead of were shoved into his mind. And he feels the robot's anger and sadness. So the transfer worked partially. This just reminds me of the OVA. He sees a robot in danger from him and attacks Mecha Sonic and forces him away from him. His thoughts complain about how much pain his ankle's in. That's better writing than forgetting that he's injured and having him fight Surge like nothing was wrong with his leg. Mecha Sonic reads his mind because of the failed transfer and he whines about the same thing again. It gets repetitive. He speeds ahead of Mecha Sonic. They run around the narrow winding floor to reference Sonic CD because we didn't have enough references in the arc apparently. And he attacks him. Then he remembers hugging the robots. And when he has his hand out, Sonic inexplicably tries to grab the hand of a robot that was just trying to kill him. And almost did much worse. So this is happening to be a boring ripoff of the OVA instead of doing something creative to end it off. Like, it's bad enough the whole arc is pointless, because it has nothing to do with any of the previous or later issues. If he was able to want to carry out an evil plan and do those things earlier, because he arbitrarily didn't have faith in the robots to fix the egg carrier, it doesn't make any sense that he'd end up remembering that he liked the badniks and telling Sonic not to save him. What a glitchy robot. He says all of his purposes have been failed and he shouldn't be saved because he's a failure. Sonic tells him to cut the crap and says that he has to live for himself and give himself value, and he grabs his hand after all. Good, it didn't completely rip off the OVA. Now there's more of a point to it. He overdid it with his foot and can't get them out of here. It tries to have humor because he's like, after all that big talk you can't even save me? But his hand gets grabbed by Tails. At least now he gets Rin to say he told him so. And he's holding hands with a robot and there's a whole chain of robots holding hands to save them. Tails tells Sigma to do something and tells everyone to pull. Sigma apologizes to Mecha and says he wasn't aware of his inner turmoil. And Sonic sheds a tear, smiling because he was being nice and forgiving of him despite all of his troublemaking. I like that there's a completely surprising twist because this happened instead of the robot just getting destroyed and left behind, like every time he fights Robotic Sonic. It cuts ahead in time, and Tails says both Mecha Sonic and Mecha Knuckles are now officially free of Eggman's old programming. It's believable that he could do that, but not Sigma because he's a genius, and he's using the tablet. But it's still hard for me to believe that Sigma couldn't do this, because he was still able to reprogram all the other robots. Sigma pets them, and Tails looks endearingly bashful, saying he's glad they could help. We see McKnuckles again, who's wearing the star-speckled cowboy hat. Mecha Sonic says he needs the courage to keep moving forwards despite his failures, and thanks Sonic. Him talking like this doesn't lead to anything more happening though, like I hoped. And instead the story's ending. I would have cared more about this if it was heard by some other character I'm being reminded of, who is also worried about his failures and called himself a failure. Instead it's just this one recent character mostly exclusive to this arc who's learning this, and I don't care that much about him. Honestly, I was hoping Starline would somehow be here to hear this, and something good would result from that motivational speech, since this would be the perfect time for us to see him again. But instead, no parallel was drawn between the two characters. So that was a waste of my time. I'm surprised he wasn't in this arc, but also relieved because I don't see why he'd be on this island instead of returning to that base he brought Bell to. I wondered if Mecha Sonic was only causing trouble because Starline reprogrammed him to, or Mecha Knuckles was reprogrammed by him, and I'm glad that didn't happen. So the story drags out Sonic leaving the island for no reason. It's trying to make this a heartfelt moment by having narration from a character we'll never see again, but it goes on too long. And the comic as a whole has disappointed me too much for me to really take it seriously and feel the feels when it has heartfelt moments, because they're so few and far between. This story was by Daniel Barnes. It's a nice surprise to see a new writer, and I hope he writes a lot more often and doesn't just get stuck with 4-issue specials. I wish he wrote all of the comic. This was about Tails going on a plane flight with Sonic and it getting struck by lightning and crashing on an island of abandoned badniks. The story refuses to explain why they're flying over the ocean, and I hope it does, since it's the whole reason this arc happens. I like that the story was quicker to get through than normal because it was mostly Sonic alone. But in retrospect, a lot of it was a waste of time that could have been removed from the story with no consequences. Sonic could have run out of the room he woke up in and then immediately saw Tails just fine. So it was all padding because for some reason, every special has to last 4 issues, except the annuals. The concept of badniks being nice is nothing new, and neither is a civilization of abandoned robots, or Sonic exploring the abandoned Death Egg in the ocean, or the plane crashing in a storm. But it is creative that it was formed by an E-Series robot who had no reason to end up here and to reprogram the robots to be good. So far it feels contrived that the story arc even happened, so it's not like the writer is as good as possible. But I didn't hate the issue, and I don't feel like the main characters are idiots, so it's a huge step up. This story by Daniel Barnes is a bunch of boring padding with too much dialogue and not enough happening as Sonic goes for a walk until Mecha Knuckles and Mecha Sonic end up causing trouble for Sonic and Sigma. And it's annoying that it goes unexplained and the story ends too fast. It doesn't make sense that if Sigma can replace the programming of a robot outright, for no reason, he failed to reprogram the evil out of these two, when he did that for all the other robots here perfectly. This story by Daniel Barnes is about Tails getting told by a robot that Sonic's being held captive for a change, and trying to go save him, looking cool with a visor and weapon, only to completely fail in his boringly predictable fight and get thrown down a garbage chute. I hate that it ends on a cliffhanger having Tails fall for a while, without us seeing him start flying to save himself. I don't like it when we're not shown a vital part of how the story progressed. This story by Daniel Barnes is about Sonic getting saved by badniks for a change, and eventually saving Mecha Sonic from some inexplicable lava or something, after he remembers enjoying himself with the badniks and tells Sonic not to save him. It one-ups the OVA by having Sonic not listen to him and save him anyways. It was a nice surprise to see how the story ended. Every other time Sonic survived a fight with a robot Sonic, he left him behind. Here, the Badniks don't show any animosity to him, no matter how ridiculously evil his plan was. Which feels right because of their cute designs. It makes sense because Sigma made them nice. And Tails gets rid of the evil programming in the robots that misbehaved on their own. It was a nice surprise that they actually were causing trouble on their own, because it means they weren't reprogrammed to do so by a bad guy just to cause conflict with nothing for him to gain. I just wish Sonic had the sense to get Tails to do this to Metal Sonic earlier, if everyone's fine with this. He's lucky Sonic didn't refuse to let him reprogram him, because he didn't tell Tails to do this to Metal Sonic. And the only reason for that is that Metal Sonic looks sort of like him. So he got soft on him enough to dismiss that as brainwashing. Mecha Sonic didn't resemble him enough because he isn't blue. So he can mess with his programming all he wants.